Hello, hello, hello. Okay, you guys, it's like amazing. This week is already like flying by. Can you believe it's day 19 of this 30-day challenge I'm doing? That's cool. Hi, Insta. What's going on, you guys? When you're here, let me know where you're coming to us from. So I would love to know if you're here in the US, if you're further away. I'd love to know where people are coming from. It's super fascinating to me. Okay, so today the topic of our live is all about this conversation I have with people a lot. So a lot of people come to me and they're like, Jen, it's so expensive to eat healthy. It's so expensive to go to Whole Foods or natural grocers or whatever that looks like in your area. Like people have this misconception that eating healthy has to be really expensive. In fact, I have a lot of people tell me that's kind of why they don't do it, is they can't afford it, right? They can't afford the healthy food. So I really wanted to come on here. You're from Texas. Thanks, Trey. Thanks for letting me know. What part of Texas? Now I'm really curious. I want to know, and a lot of people want to know, like, how do I do it? Where do I start? So the main thing I want to share today is like, it doesn't have to be all about like the organic natural food stores. Like it just doesn't, you guys, it doesn't have to be about that at all. In fact, there's very few things I buy at like Whole Foods or natural grocers. And most of the time I'm at Winco. And Winco, for those of you who are not in like Idaho or this side of the country, is like a bulk food shopping place, right? It's like a discount kind of food store. It's like a big outlet kind of spot. And there's some great things you can get at Winco. And I have a family of 5, right? And all 3 of the kids are between the ages of 13 and almost 16. So if you can imagine what happens in our house, like we have to be healthy, but we also get to watch our budget, right? So I want to share some of the things that I do in order to cut costs for my family and so that we can continue to eat healthy. So let's dive in. If you guys have questions when you hop on, please let me know. And when you're here on Facebook, give me a heart, give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're joining me so that I can be sure and say hi. And if you're watching on a replay, please let me know you're on replay. Okay, so the first thing I want to share with you guys is you need to decide that you're going to buy in bulk. Going back and forth to the store 3 times a week is not good on your pocketbook, and you end up spending a ton more. So a lot of people get nervous because like, well, I don't want to buy vegetables in bulk because they're going to go bad. Well, newsflash, you guys, you can freeze vegetables. In fact, I encourage you to freeze your vegetables because when you buy seasonal vegetables and you freeze them at their peak, it's going to retain all the nutrients and vitamins when you freeze them properly. Okay, so freezing them properly is an airtight container or sealer, like a freeze bag sealer, a vacuum sealer to put them in your freezer. So when you're going to the grocery store, have the idea that you need to be buying in bulk. It's also going to help you cut time and shave time off of your life because none of us want to be spending our time going back and forth to the grocery store 3 times a week, right? It's not only exhausting, it's time consuming, and it's irritating. It irritates me when I have to do that. And it costs a lot more. Okay, so if you have a grocery outlet or something like that in your area that has bulk food, I really recommend you go into the bulk section and look and see what you can find. So most of these discount grocery outlets or chains have amazing bulk food item sections. So I have to be a little careful with some of the bulk foods because there could be cross-contamination and my daughter is allergic to nuts. So there are some areas where we have to be really careful in our home. But if you go into the bulk food section, you can find everything there now. You can find all of your unsalted raw nuts in bulk for about half the price as you're going to pay for, the prepackaged containers of nuts. And then all you have to do is come home and prepackage them yourself. So using the little resealable bags, or if you're trying to really be environmentally conscious, which I recommend you doing, getting the little containers that you can just continue to reuse, right? And put them in your cupboard, in your pantry. As soon as you get home, dish out a portion and put them away. Okay, it's a great way to save some money on nuts. I eat a lot of nuts. I love them, but they're expensive, right? So you have to really try to cut corners there. So you can do all of that with your bulk area in the grocery store. So next time you're at one of the stores, take the time to go in and look through it. You can get everything there from stevia in bulk, which I do, which I also get my cinnamon there in bulk and some of my spices there in bulk. So it doesn't have to always be organic for it to be okay. So, eating healthy doesn't have to be organic. Like in a perfect world, yes, we would all be able to afford organic food all of the time, but don't let that stop you. Just because you can't afford to maybe buy the dollar more for an avocado or a piece of fruit that's organic doesn't mean you shouldn't buy the fruit. Like buy the fruit. Even if it's not organic, it's better than nothing, right? So I really want to emphasize that. Most of the time there's items that I do buy organic, and there are items that I absolutely don't because I don't think you need to, like avocados, like bananas. There's some things that, oranges, I don't buy organic. So there's a lot of things that I don't buy organic. And another thing too is when you're buying your fresh veggies and you're buying them in bulk and you're at the grocery store and you're packing them down, sometimes I come home and I pre-cut them and put them in the freezer, just to kind of get ahead of the game. Right? It's a lot easier to do that and just pull them out in individual packages and put them on the counter, and they defrost during the day, and you can pop them in the oven or in your dish, whatever you're making. So do that. It's going to save you money. It's also a really good idea to buy seasonally. So another really good tip to save money is to go to the farmers markets. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but the farmers markets generally have fresh produce that's seasonal, meaning it's at the peak of its nutrient content, vitamin content, and it's a lot less expensive than the markup at the big grocery stores. So cruise, like really take some time to cruise through the farmers markets in your town, and you can go online and find them. And they actually provide a great variety of fresh seasonal vegetables and fruits, sometimes even meat and poultries, that you can get for a lot less in the grocery store. And most of the time it's organic. And it's local, so it's less there's less environmental impact when you're buying local like that. There's also things like I've shared before called Bountiful Basket, and it's like a local co-op where it's very inexpensive and you pay weekly for a delivery of locally sourced fresh produce and sometimes meats as well. And that's also extremely low cost. So it's a lot less money than if you were to go to the grocery store and actually buy that individually. They package it in these beautiful packages, and sometimes you get strawberries, sometimes you get peaches, sometimes you get different things. And it's a great way to introduce variety into your family's diets. And that's really also good for good gut bacteria, right? So really good ways to do that is to eat seasonally and go to your local farmer's market. It's gonna be less expensive. Okay, so moving on. So I was recently at my dad's house, and it was really interesting to me because he had a lot of canned foods, right? He had a lot of like pre-canned like peas and like green beans and things that he thought were really healthy, but we had to kind of go down this road of there's tons of, different preservatives and nasty stuff in there that we don't really want. But there is an exception to this rule. So I am a firm believer in pickled products, right? Like your pickled beets. And if you don't want to pickle them yourself, sauerkraut, things like that, pickled beets and pickled food is very inexpensive. Very inexpensive, even pickles, right? Very inexpensive. The pickling process actually produces good bacteria in the product. So when you're pickling beets, or you're pickling even carrots, or you're pickling any of these things, it creates a lot of good bacteria, probiotics, and it's really good for your microbiome. So it's a really good, cheap way to get good bacteria into your system. If you can't afford the really fancy Greek or Bulgarian yogurt, then definitely go that route. There's just as many great benefits to your gut bacteria and your gut health in those fermented foods as there are in the yogurt. Okay, so that's a different way to get some probiotics into your system. Another thing to remember is frozen is not bad, you guys. People have this thing, oh, I'm eating frozen vegetables. So what's wrong with frozen vegetables? I mean, as long as there's not a bunch of preservatives in the frozen vegetables, they're cheap, they're easy to put into your dishes, they're easy to blend into your blender and smoothies. I put cauliflower and frozen spinach in my smoothies all the time, right? And it's cheap and it's less work for you. So if you're on a budget, don't be afraid of the frozen vegetables. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's definitely helping you get that fiber in and getting those micronutrients into your system, which is super important. We all need that in order to have good metabolic function, right? So if that's the way that you can get it in, and it's harder for you to, or it's more challenging for you to buy the fresh stuff because it might be a little bit more expensive, so on and so forth in the grocery store, those are some ideas for you to get some of that into your home and into your family's bellies. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is meat. So proteins. So this is a challenge for a lot of people because when you go to the grocery store, the commercially processed meat is very cheap. It's extremely cheap. And it's important for you to understand, if you're going to splurge on something, I really recommend you splurge here. So buying grass-fed, good quality proteins and meats is imperative for your health. So the low quality, normally processed foods, the meats, the processed poultry, the processed ground beef, there's a lot of fillers in it, and plus the cows are fed a diet of grain and soy and corn, which is not ideal, right? Because that's not going to get what they need, and what cows need to produce what's called conjoleic linear. Can't get it right. Caneliac it's CLA. I can't say the word, but it's called CLA. And the CLA is a type of fat, a fatty acid, a chain that's really important for our bodies. And we can only get it from like grass finished proteins. And it's in some wild meat as well. So that's why wild meat is important to get. And you can sometimes get that from your local butchers. You can also sometimes get it if you put a post out on Craigslist. People looking to buy wild game from hunters, they sell it. And it's usually a lot cheaper than the store-bought stuff. So those are some ideas too in order to get your hands on some grass-finished meat. The other thing to consider too is if you're going to buy organic, make sure that it's with no antibiotics in the meat that you're buying and no hormones, right? We don't want that stuff in our system. We get enough of that in our environment. So really try to be cautious with your meat. That's the one area I would recommend. You know, if you have to pay $1 more a pound, that's definitely where you should splurge instead of on the other stuff that we talked about. Okay. The other idea with that too is there's a company called ButcherBox, and it's actually an organic company that has really locally sourced, good quality meat. It's not raised with antibiotics. It's not fed a corn or soy diet, and you can actually have the meat delivered to your home for less. If you're not in Hawaii or Alaska, the shipping is free, I believe, for less than most commercially processed meats that you can buy in the store per pound. Seriously, they're making it affordable for people, which is amazing because I think that good quality protein is really important. If you're eating meat, if you don't eat meat, you don't have to worry about this. But if you are eating meat, you know, this is definitely something that you want to check out. So ButcherBox. The next thing is your nut butters. So a lot of people get it really caught up in almond butters or the fancy butters. You know, peanut butter is great. It has tons of protein. And if you don't have an allergy to peanuts, I think that peanut butter is cheap and it's really, really good source of protein. So I would really look at going into the bulk food section of your grocery store, and they usually have the peanut butter grinders, okay? So the peanut butter grinders is where you can actually grind the raw peanuts into peanut form. You just want to make sure that the peanuts are good quality, meaning they're not fried in cottonseed oil or soybean oil. And then once you can kind of process those yourself, you've got a really nice consistency of peanut butter, and it's cheap, really, really cheap, like half the price of what you would buy like in a big jug of peanut butter. So that's another way for you to cut costs and get some good nutrients into your